Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
This is Bob Bender. You're listening to this edition of the business side of music. This week we have in the studio Jacky Jack White. Some of you out there may not actually know who he is, but I do after doing some research and being introduced to him. He was the songwriter, I guess we could say a co-songwriter with Kathy Mattea's husband, John Vasner, who wrote the song If I Didn't Love You, which wound up being a top 10 Billboard song for Steve Wariner back in 1993. Jacky Jack White lives in Livingston, Alabama, where he's ministered at the Livingston Church of Christ for over 20 years. He's had songs on the charts as a singer and songwriter going all the way back to 1985. Some of the artists who have recorded his songs along with Steve Wariner are Ray Stevens, Charley Pride, Buddy Jewell, Neal McCoy, J.D. Fortune of INXS, and Mark Lowry, one of my favorite artists. I love Mark Lowry. Jack received an ASCAP award for the song If I Didn't Love You and an NSAI award for the #1 Southern Gospel song When Men Pray. I should say he is an Alabama State Council on the Arts Fellowship in Music recipient. That right there is a mouthful. The review received citations of excellence from the Country Music Association and the National Geographic Tourism Board. We got to talk about that one. Jack has been a recording artist on the Silver Wolf Music Folk label since 1998. Jack, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. After hearing that introduction, I felt kind of like that guy in that old beer commercial. I got to meet this guy.
Well, I'm glad I did. When you and I talked on the phone yesterday, we were kind of making some notes here, and I was getting to know you. I felt the same way. It's like, man, this guy's got stories for days. I can't wait to do this. So, let's start in the very beginning. How'd you get into this business? I know you told me on the conversation we had yesterday that you wound up cutting some demo songs at Belmont, but where'd you get your start?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm an identical twin. My brother, Dr. John White, lives in Columbia, Tennessee. That's where I was born and raised, in Columbia. My folks go back there into the very early 1800s, into the teens. We were identical twins, of course, and are identical twins. And we started performing when we were, 3 years old, 4 years old. And I'm not saying we were professionals by any stretch of the imagination, but we were always singing someplace or doing something. And my dad's family, on his side, they were just incredible musicians and singers. And they were not professionals. They were just really hard-working folks. My great-great-grandfather had been a Civil War hero, and he had money and a lot of land at one time. And then, he drank it up and gambled and wasted the rest of the money, I guess. He was a character, of course, and so they had to work hard. They really had to work hard on the old Middle Tennessee farm there in Columbia, Tennessee. But anyway, I grew up around religion. They were all Church of Christ folks, and what was so strange about that, of course, they didn't have musical instruments in the church, but when they'd come back from church and during the week when they had time, they'd play all kinds of instruments. My grandmother could play just about any instrument, and
right.
Her main instrument was the piano, and my grandfather played the banjo, and so we just always around it. And I think that both my brother and myself, we enjoyed being in front of people. Kind of like to quote a guy I used to write for, Ray Pillow, the Grand Ole Opry. I didn't want to have money. I just wanted to be somebody.
Right. Yeah.
I really did. I think I wanted to be famous or something. That got in my bloodstream pretty early. And although I failed miserably at it, but I'm a regional celebrity. I'll tell you that. But anyway, I just always, I think that's really what. I had a fire in the belly about that, and I got into school, and I played at it a little bit. I never did. I mean, I loved playing baseball and stuff like that, and riding horses and just having a great time. And the whole thing almost passed me by because I'd graduated from high school, and We didn't have a whole lot of money, so I had to work like a little old sailor. But when I was about 23, I guess it was, I had a opportunity to meet a guy who was a writer. And as you well know, it's just a fact. Most songwriters, because it's such a competitive industry, it's two words: music, business. Music is easy. The business is just devastating sometimes. But a lot of times, songwriters are so doggone competitive, and they don't want to help one another. A lot of times that happens, and I know some people disagree with that, but that's just the way it looked at first with me. And there's this one guy, and he liked me, and friends do business with friends. His name was Don Huber. He'd had a little bit of success, but he taught at Vanderbilt University, and I was finishing up my undergraduate at Lipscomb, getting my graduate degree at Tennessee State in psychology. He encouraged me, and he actually taught me craftsmanship. There is a craftsmanship into songwriting. And so he taught me what he knew of the craft. And when you learn how to make the cabinet, you decide how you're going to dress that cabinet up. So I learned kind of the structure and the clinical part of it. But then after that, then I started getting out of my own way and writing some songs.
And from what I understand, back in the earlier days, you mentioned to me that you went to Mike Curb, and at that time they had a studio in Belmont.
What about Mike Curb? I always knew about Mike Curb, and here's one thing about it. I think this really has helped me as a writer. Even though I was a baseball player and a kind of a rounder as a kid, which is kind of an understatement, but I always read. I'm talking about from the time I could read. I always read a lot of books and everything. So I had always read about entertainment folks a lot too. I read about actors and actresses and singers and songwriters. I knew all about Mike Curb and his folk group, and how he was really a businessman on top of being he's a promoter, and he published. He knew how to do things. When I was getting my first demos made, I was at Lipscomb. Well, I just went down the street to Belmont because this shows you how far back this goes. I heard that they'd been given a studio by Mike Curb of the Mike Curb congregation. I went to him. He had an office about the size of my clothes closet, and I knocked on his door and walked in there and said, you've got a studio, and I really need to make some demos. And he just looked at me like, God, this guy is so ignorant, bless his heart. He says, well, could you pay my engineer? He said, we're going to spring break. I'll just let you use the new studio. I said, well, yeah, I can pay your engineer. So I made about 16 demos. And one of those demos that we made was a song, if I'm not mistaken, was Exchange of Hearts, which is an international hit. And when you get on Google, YouTube, you get 21 million hits off that one song. Maybe more than that, because that was just the last time I checked was some months ago. So who knows how many? But it's a standard in the Pacific Rim of the world. But anyway, I'll tell you the rest of that story. I got a song recorded that was the title cut for a David Slater album. David was on Capitol, and it's another long story. But he won Star Search, and I was his partner, and so I wrote all these songs for him for the Star Search. He wrote the melodies, I wrote the lyrics. And so I went back to it was Dr. Malloy. I went back to thank him. And he looked at me and he says, Jack, I've been teaching here for 20-something years. You're the first person that ever came back to thank me for anything. I thought that was wild, And Belmont I know that they recognized it, but that guy, he's the guy who started the huge success that they've had in that music, But that's how Mike Curb came in, because I knew Mike had given them the studio.
We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk a little bit more about where you've been and what you're doing and where things are going for you these days. This is Bob Bender, and you're listening to this edition of The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hi, this is Vinny Rebus, the founder of Indie Connect. Our goal is to ensure that you have the knowledge, the tools, skills, resources, and connections that you need to develop a profitable and long-lasting career in music. One way we do this is through these Business Side of Music podcasts. I'd also like to invite you to check out Indie Connect magazine, our free multimedia online publication packed with practical interviews and advice from music industry experts. Go to www.indieconnectmag. That's www.indieconnectmag.com. Let us walk with you and guide you every step of your musical journey.
You're listening to the business side of music.
This is Bob Bender. You're listening to this edition of the business side of music. Let's talk about the Sucarnochee Revue.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm involved in the Sucarnochee Revue. I produce and host that. I founded it, and that goes all over the country. And it's been on radio and 3 documentaries on it and everything else. It's
Now, how do you pronounce that?
Sucarnochee. It's spelled Sucarnochee, and it's a river down here. Sucarnochee. We just say Sucarnochee, and it's a Choctaw word. I used to think it meant possum. Then all of a sudden I said, man, I know that this is muscadine grapes. And the next thing I found these Choctaws, and I said, tell me what Sucarnochee really means. He says, and every one of them said the same thing. These are people in their 40s and 50s. Oh, that's an old language. That's an old word. Said you'll have to ask somebody, one of the ancients. So I found this Choctaw was about 90 years old, this old woman. And I said, what about Sucarnochee? What does it mean? She says, that's really Sucarnochee. Sucarnochee. I said, well, what does it mean? She says, cooking hog. And I said, well, there ain't nothing romantic about that, is it? Cooking hog.
No. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the Sucarnochee Revue. You host this monthly stage show.
Yeah, I founded it, and I've been doing it for Mary Mac is 14 years old. For 14 years again.
And that's at the Temple Theater,
Meridian, Mississippi. We started at the University of West Alabama in Livingston, and we did it concurrent. We do 18 shows a year sometimes, but now we just do 12 a year. We do them all at the Temple Theater. And we used to do them for NPR, for Alabama and Mississippi Public Radio. And then it went all over the country, syndicated on commercial stations. Then it went overseas. We had a television show that went on public television in Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida, I think it was. And then I pulled a plug on it about almost 2 years ago. And then this guy called me up from Temple Theater and just begged me to come back. I didn't know if I wanted to do that or not, but I came back in January. It's the first of the year, January. And we've done 3 shows, and they were very well received. And I'm making some money off of it, so as long as I make money, I'm going to do it. But it's a lot of work. People don't have any idea how. You know what the average life of a show like that is?
No, I don't.
Here's the average life of a show like that. We've been doing it for all 14 years, and I don't know how many radio shows we've done, probably 90-something that we've taped. And then we've done 26 television shows, 3 documentaries. And the average life of one of these shows, and as far as live stage shows, we're talking about 200 something. The average life of a show like this is 3 shows.
Really?
The average life of something like this is 3 shows, because thousands of people come up with an idea. They're going to do something like the Prairie Home Companion, and they do 1 show and it dies. And so that's why the average is so low. But the average life is 3 shows.
So how did you get started with this?
Well, the guy called me one night. I was coming back from doing a show in Atlanta that was for their public radio. And as I was driving back, I kept thinking to myself, and I wasn't trying to be negative, and I wasn't talking to anybody about it, but I just said, that show's not going to work. And I was trying to figure out why it wasn't going to work. It had some great music. It had some funny sketches and stuff like that, But, it was kind of like when I listened to Prairie Home Companion. I'm a real funny guy, and I have a blast out of life. But there's too much silliness in this world. Like the commercials. People are always acting like they're mentally impaired. They think that's supposed to be funny. Well,
I got to tell you, that is probably one of my biggest bones of contention. My wife and I will sit and watch TV, and we watch these commercials, and we're like, who are they building these for?
So I'm
idiots?
supposed to go out here and like it because these folks are. I just started thinking the reason that show's not going to work, and the reason I really don't like Prairie Home Companion is because it just gets stupid after a little while. And I said, why couldn't you? And I always liked the Opry, but the one thing that I always thought in the back of my mind, even when I was a very young boy, and I listened to opera religiously when I was fourth, fifth grade, they need to have more music than just country music. Every once in a while, they'd have the Byrds. I mean, once every 10 years, they'd have somebody like the Byrds, or they'd have, somebody that was a rock and roller every 10 years or so. But that ain't enough. And so on my show, on a given night, we'll just have 8 acts, and you might have a jazz, country, blues, gospel, black gospel, bluegrass. They'll all be on the same show. It's a true review, a variety show. And guess what? People love that, because guess what? I don't do like other people to say, okay, and now here is the Bobby Henson family, and they're going to be up here for 30 minutes. You get up there. That's one thing I learned from the Opry. Get up there and do 2 songs and get your butt off, because not everybody out in that crowd is going to love you. I don't care how good you are. And then the next one gets up and says, well, I didn't like that group there, but I like this group pretty good. And the next one comes, I like that group pretty good. I didn't like it as good as the second group. Fourth, you know what I'm saying?
And how many acts on a review?
Sometimes it's as many as 10, but I usually average around 8. It's a 2-hour show.
Very good.
2-hour show.
Where can people find out about it?
On my website, JackyJack.com. Of course, we have it the first Friday of every month in Meridian, Mississippi, at the beautiful historic Temple Theater, 1,300 seat. Old Sanger Theater.
I'm definitely going to have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a fun place.
Let's talk a little bit about getting back to your songwriting here. You had the opportunity to write some songs for some of my favorites. I got to work with Ray Stevens at one point.
Kidding.
And
I can tell you some funny story about all that crap if you want to.
I tell you what, let's take a break, and then we'll come back, and then we're going to talk about these funny stories with Ray Stevens. You're listening to Bob Bender, the business side of music, with our special guest Jacky Jack White here in the studio.
You're listening to the business side of music. Next up, the Indie Artist Spotlight, brought to you by Reverb Nation.
Hi everyone, I'm Charity Bowden from Hope Hall, Alabama.
Did you ever try to sleep with a pesky mosquito buzzing in your ear? You gotta jump out of bed, turn the light on and swat it till it disappears.
I was on season 11 of NBC's show The Voice, and I'm a proud member of Reverb Nation.
When you told me tonight you were leaving town.
Some of my musical influences while I was growing up was Patsy Cline, Martina McBride, Dolly Parton, Carrie Underwood, Miranda Lambert, and Hank Williams.
Well, that's just my luck. Baby, it's been fun. I know you gotta run. I won't say goodbye, 'cause it isn't. It's good.
Over the last few years, I have really enjoyed performing at festivals and benefits. I'm currently a student at the University of Montevallo and perform all around the Southeast.
I may never find another guy quite like you. Well, I'll risk it. Gonna throw a big party in your honor tonight. Oh, I guess you'll miss it. Baby, don't you worry. For your sake, I'll be strong.
I'm also currently working on an EP project and would love to share with you my song, What Turns Me On.
Shop, coffee bar, hopper, you can sit through ballet or even opera. For my love, don't fool around, put your toilet seat down, serve supper, do the dishes, even clean the kitchen counter up. You can't do enough, baby, that's you. You're my man. You can be what I need better than anybody a tire change, an old chicken, honky tonkin' redneck, another Bob Vila, one-man wrecking crew. And I like that too. Baby, that's you. You're my man. You can be what I need better than anybody else can. You can do me right and do it all night long. Baby, that's you, and that's what turns me on. Baby, that's you. You're my man. You can be what I need better than anybody else can. You can do me right and do it all night long. Baby, that's you, and that's what turns me on. Baby, that's you, and all you do is what turns me on.
Once again, this is Charity Bowden, and I am a proud member of Reverb Nation.
You're listening to the business side of music.
We're back in the studio with Jacky Jack White. This is Bob Bender. You're listening to this edition of the business side of music. Before we went to break, we're getting ready to talk about Ray Stevens. I had the opportunity to work with him briefly when I was at one of the record labels back in the 90s, and you obviously have some stories to share about
Yeah,
him.
I think the first thing, I just talked to Ray Pillow. Ray Pillow was my publisher at that time. And he had already published big songs like God Bless the USA and stuff like that. You know, he was on the Opry. But Ray played golf all the time with Ray Stevens. Ray Pillow will say to this day that nobody could gurm anybody worse than I did. You know what the term gurm means?
Yeah, I do.
could gurm
I
people
do.
because the thing about it is I just had tremendous respect for people who had done a lot in the music business. I really like the older artists. I just want to know everything about them. And it would make him so mad because he was an older artist and he'd done all these shows with these people and they were just people that put on their britches like everybody else. And he got really tired of the way I'd venerate all these people. And Ray Stevens, by the way, he kind of looked at me with a jaundiced eye too because, I was a minister and they just all thought that was weird, to be quite frank with you. But anyway, I was sitting around one day and Ray and Larry McFadden, his partner, came in there and said, Jack, you're strange. You're crazy. Why don't you write a real funny song for Ray Stevens? Because he needs one more song. He said, you're idiotic. You can do that. And I said, well, sure. I said, that's no problem. And I was writing all these really great, pretty songs. And Lee Greenwood had recorded Exchange of Hearts, but we didn't know he wasn't going to release it. And David Slater did release it later. And of course, that song is the one that became such a huge hit in the Pacific Rim of this world. But anyway, I went home. I was living in McMinnville. I was preaching in McMinnville. And I tell you, have you ever had to write a funny song?
No, I have to say I've never ventured into that
I'm going to tell
realm.
you something. I am fun. I'm just hilarious. I'm like Heckle and Jekyll fun. But I got to tell you, I went home and I couldn't write anything. It was awful. I mean, I couldn't come up with a thing. And so anyway, I told him I'd have it ready by Thursday or something like that. So anyway, I got in my car and I was driving from McMinnville to Nashville, which was an hour and a half. Dadgummit, my car blew up. My motor blew up. And this banker, my banker passed by. He says, well, Jack, I got to go to a meeting. He said, well, let me take you on to a wrecker in Murfreesboro. I said, well, okay. So I go to a wrecker and I get in this wrecker with this guy. It's kind of hot weather and he's wearing a torn up athletic shirt, got hose in it and everything. And he's smoking a cigar and he's stinking and nasty. We had the windows rolled down that thing. And I helped him hook up the car. We hooked up that car and we took off down the road. And I'm thinking, I'm going to do I'm going to be hard pressed to rent a car and get up there in time for this meeting I'm going to have. But anyway, he says to me, he says, where'd you get that car? Where'd you buy that car from? And I said, well, I bought it from my dad. He said, you bought that car from your dad? I said, yeah, I sure did. He said, dang, you ought to take him to people's court. And he started laughing. I said, what'd you say? And you got to keep in mind, this is like 1985. And I said, people's court. I said, you got anything I can write on? He gave me a receipt book and a pencil. And I wrote just straight ahead. Hello, Judge Wapner, let us on that people's court. Hello, Judge Wapner, you're a court of last resort. Our lives are up against the wall. We got to get on that TV and tell it all. Judge Wapner, let us on that people's court. I don't know why it started making me think about a divorce, because you know that ain't a divorce court. But anyway, I wrote this crazy song about these two rednecks getting on people's court. He's got him a triple knit leisure suit that his mama made for him so he could wear it on people's court. All this crazy stuff. And so anyway, get this. I rent this car, drive up there, and I'm supposed to meet him like at 4:00. And I get there at the office on Music Row at 3:46. I run up the stairs with this thing, this receipt book thing. And I ran up there, and there's my partner, David Slater, who wrote melodies for me. I said, hey, look, come in here. We had this really stupid kind of electric piano up there, and we had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And I said, hey, come in here. I said, start playing a vamp. Just start playing a vamp, like da-da-da, boom, 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 da-da-da, boom, boom, And I put that reel-to-reel on record, and I start singing the best of my ability this crazy, idiotic song, Hello, Judge Wapner, let us on the people's court. And so, just like in the movies, I'm not making this up. You know how you'd stop the thing and you'd rewind it and the tape would go shoop, 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 shoop. Well, just as that reel was going shoop, 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 I'd rewound it, and all of a sudden it comes off the reel and shoop, 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 shoop. Larry McFadden and Ray Pillow walk in the door and said, have you got that song for Ray Stevens? I said, yeah, we got it right here. And they took it off the reel. It says, have you got it typed up lyric sheets? And I said, no, I just got it handwritten. He said, well, take it out here to Marjorie and let her type it up right now. We got to go. I said, okay. So I took it out there, and I had to stand over this secretary and tell her what the words were because my handwriting was so lousy. And so anyway, Lee Greenwood, by the way, was writing a song with me and David that day afterwards. And so we were writing a song, and we waited, and I was sweating like a Libyan fighter pilot because I kept thinking, gee, I wonder what they're going to think about that crazy song. So we sat in there for, as you well know, none of this stuff ever happens in real life. It happens in the movies. It doesn't happen like this in real life. It usually takes months, and they got to have a committee meeting and all this kind of baloney. Well, anyway, they come back after about an hour, and they're looking at me like this man needs to be committed, And they said, that is the craziest, sorriest thing we've ever heard in our lives. I wish we'd listened to it before we took it over there to them. I said, well, what'd they say? They said, well, they're going to record it, but he's going to let that CW, what is that guy? The guy wrote the Mississippi Squirrel song. CW somebody. Anybody. He was kind of Ray Stevens' in-house writer, He's going to polish it up, and he's going to get the third credit on this song. And I said, I don't care if he gets third credit. So he polished it up. He made it more commercial because what I had written was really crazy. But that's how the song got recorded, and the thing charted. But what was great about it is that album that it was on went to number 11 and stayed number 11 just about the whole year. I mean, it was a really good selling album, and it really did us a lot of good. And that's how I got started with it right there.
And I think that's what every songwriter needs to hear. They need to hear those stories because, a lot of times, if it just comes to you and you think it's crazy, it may just be crazy enough to be good.
Well, I've written a bunch of songs that were just absolutely too insane to be recorded by anybody.
You still got them?
I sure do. I remember this one guy. I'm not going to mention George Tarrant's name because he's had a lot of success, written a lot of number ones and stuff. Brad Paisley does, but I remember one time, I don't know what we were thinking about. We wrote a song about Pee Wee Herman called "I'm Pulling for Pee Wee," and I don't think that thing's ever going to be recorded. So, you know, there's a lot of songs that you write. I remember Karen State. I wrote a lot with Karen at one time, and Karen would say, "Oh, you know, we don't write any bad songs. We just write songs that maybe aren't commercial." But I can tell you for a fact, I've written a lot of stupid songs. I've written a lot of bad songs, and I don't regret a single dadgum one of them. I really don't. I mean, you know, that's just what gets you there.
I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
This is one thing that we ask all of our guests on the show. If you had one bit of advice to give to an aspiring songwriter or an aspiring artist, what would it be?
Get out of your way. Get out of your own way.
Wow.
Just get out of your own way. Don't you realize that these gifts that God has given you are for a purpose? And it's more than just to get on a chart or to make money or so you can go out and sing 15 verses how great I am. You've been given these gifts so you'll have an opportunity to glorify God. And you know, we don't always do a very good job of that. You know, it's just more than about the music. With me in the music business, that tell me it's a heck of a lot more than just writing some 3-minute song. You know what I'm saying? And not to discount the 3-minute songs. That's a beautiful thing. It's fun. Gosh, I've got so much joy and gratification out of being able to do those kind of things. And I love playing a guitar, and I love getting out there and singing behind that skinny microphone. But it's just a heck of a lot more than about the music, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, you have shared some amazing stories with us. And
well, it's been great being with you. I mean, a lot of fun today. A lot of fun.
oh, well, thank you very much. We're going to get the word out.
All right, man.
If you're interested in learning more about our show, drop us a line at musicpodcast@mail.com. That's musicpodcast@mail.com. If you have any suggestions of persons or topics that involve some facet of the music industry that you'd like to hear about on our podcast, please feel free to let us know. You can follow us on Facebook on the Business Side of Music podcast page. You can also find us on Twitter at Music Business Podcast. Also, if you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, post a review on what you think of our show. This is Bob Bender, and you've been listening to this edition of The Business Side of Music.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender for Bob Bender Productions. Co-producer for the show is Vinny Rebus. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.